Welcome back to the Football Terrace. Ben Jacobs will be with us momentarily. He's just taking an important call that he has to finish. So I didn't want to leave you waiting any longer. I know we're late going live, but hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribing. Big news to delve into today. The second official bid for Urian Timber has been made by Arsenal. They want a done deal this week. They want to complete the deal and get it over the line this week. Also taking a look at the Declan Rice situation. Ben is going to be giving us his insight into that deal. What is happening with it? What direction is this going to end up in? When is Man City's bid, if ever, going to arrive? We're taking a look at Caicedo as well. The Athletic reporting that Man United are holding talks with him about a potential move. But of course, the big reports over the weekend is that he wants Chelsea. Chelsea want him, and they are leading that race. We're also taking a look at the Mason Mount situation. Deal on, deal off, deal on, deal off. What is this posturing? Is this just briefing? We want to understand where that is at. And of course, Ben's going to be giving us his insight, his knowledge and information. That's all coming up very soon. Taking a look at Kylian Mbappe as well, because there's talk of a £215 million transfer of him leaving PSG this summer, looking to join Real Madrid. So we'll be delving into all of that and much, much more on the show with you today. And so some people here saying Ben Jacobs' insight, a long-winded answer. Listen, but I'm going to be really rude to you now in a circle. It's only the dullards that don't want to listen, because you need the information to understand what's going on so you don't get triggered by the constant headlines and updates on transfers. It's why I'm so relaxed, because there's always so much more going on than meets the eye. Last week, I quoted something that David Ornstein had written on The Athletic, and I was attacked for being a liar. I was attacked for being a liar because he hadn't tweeted it. It was just in the article. It shows people don't read things. But look, Ben will be joining us very, very soon on the show. We are sorry that we went late for you today, but he'll be with us momentarily. He did tell me it'd be 6 minutes ago. So he's obviously having his ear tuned off over something. I don't know what it's about either. It's a private phone call. So I hope that everything's okay, though, by the way, in relation to that. But Urian Timber news, we're looking at Man United and their pursuit of Mason Mount, Caicedo, Rice, and many other things on the agenda today. Terry been living in that linen shirt. Now, I have about 7 or 8 of them. It's boohoo, bruv. Real cheap stuff. Costs about $8.99. So I've got about 8 of them. And plus, I don't know if you guys, this is what I do when I stream. I put on like a shirt like this. When I finish, I take it off and put a t-shirt on. So this t-shirt gets worn for like an hour a day. So, or whatever it is. But there we go. We're having a little bit more for you as well on the show today. I like some of your comments here. Let me know where you're watching from as well, ladies and gentlemen. I want to know where you're watching from, where you're at around the UK and the rest of the world. I did think Ben was going to be on with me by now, so I'm now stalling because I'm waiting for him before I talk about these transfers. I thought it'd be 2 minutes. I wanted to start. I saw a lot of you were getting very restless in the comment section below. But let us know what you want the first subject to be on, I suppose, and we'll kind of get ready. I think Ben's back with us now. As here he is, he's back with us. We're bringing him in to the mix. Ben is here. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. Sorry, I am late to the show. It is my fault, not Terry's fault, as far as the chat is concerned. But good to be here.
Absolutely, and it just sounds like lots to delve into today. And I wanted to start off actually with the big breaking news of the day, the Timber news that the second official bid has gone in. What's your understanding of this and sort of closeness to this deal being concluded and completed for Arsenal?
Well, there's no problem on the player side. That's the first thing to say. So Arsenal are relatively confident. The opening bid was somewhere in the region of 30 million. The second bid has been increased to what seemed to be more competitive. But we do have to just bear in mind one thing in all of this, which is from Ajax's perspective, their starting valuation, which is to be taken with a little bit of a pinch of salt, was £50 million. So that's 60 million euros. And the second bid from Arsenal is under that number. And as a consequence, there might still be a little bit of back and forth on this one. We're going to have to wait and see. But From Arsenal's point of view, they think that the bid is competitive, and not only that, they believe that it's more than fair. So there is a feeling that this one may get done quickly, one way or the other. I don't see Arsenal going up to anywhere close to 60 million euros. So as a consequence, we now need to wait and see whether or not Ajax accept the proposal. I'm told that that proposal is around the 40 million mark now, which again, for the player and for Ajax, might be enough to kind of push this one over the line. If it gets done, it would be for a 5-year deal. The personal terms have already been agreed with Timber, who wants the move. So it's now just between Ajax and Arsenal. And I think that Arsenal have wanted this one to be done very quickly. And when you look at like-for-like profiles and ages and valuations, I think somewhere in the region of 40 million might be pretty close to getting this one done. So Arsenal are confident now at this point, but it's still awaiting at the time that we're speaking any feedback from Ajax's perspective.
I hear you on that. I think it was a bit of a out of the blue transfer story that broke last Monday, very, very late on Monday night, about 9:30, 10 p.m. at night. But yeah, escalated pretty quickly. Is there any competition from any other clubs as far as you're aware? Is anybody else rumored to be maybe making a late swoop for Timber?
Not necessarily. Lots of clubs have looked at the player in the past, but Arsenal have got a reasonably clear run at this point. I think that it's normal for other teams to at least explore the terms of the deal. And one of the things about Arsenal is that they're disciplined in their approach. So that always leaves the door open. When we talk about Rice, we can obviously discuss the Manchester City interest, even though, again, at the time we're recording this, they haven't placed a bid. So Tottenham, for example, have looked historically at Timber. Arsenal fans will be delighted, therefore, if they get it over the line because they can claim a victory over Spurs, but Tottenham haven't bid. Bayern and PSG have looked at the player as well, but that's normal. But at this stage, it's clear at the player end that Timber wants Arsenal, and personal terms are already in place. So it's really, again, just about Arsenal and Ajax in the same way that really Rice is just about Arsenal and West Ham.
Yeah, totally understand that. And viewers, keep letting us know where you're watching from around the world. Look at that. We've got one in Los Angeles, Frank here, and one in Coventry. Worlds apart there, but we love to see it. I'd rather live in Coventry, to be fair, but that's a joke. LA is amazing.
Don't mention Coventry. I'm a Leicester fan, of course. We're technically rivals.
Technically.
Everyone says, by the way, that it's Leicester, Forest, Derby, and that's true. And then Forest and Derby would claim that they're more fierce than, say, Leicester and Derby or Leicester and Forest, but Coventry Leicester will claim each other as a rivalry as well. So I'm actually really pleased to see Coventry are sort of a little bit healthier at this point, even though they weren't able to get promoted to the Premier League. But yes, less of the Coventry, more of the Leicester.
Absolutely. We'll come back to Arsenal a little bit later in the show, ladies and gentlemen, because we are going to be talking Rice. I wanted to understand. I've obviously read a lot of your tweets over the weekend, and I implore people to read Ben's tweets and his threads. He's a proper journalist. You'll get real context. What's going on with the Mason Mount situation? The bid was rejected. United reportedly walked away. We're going to try and sign Caicedo. Then Chelsea told the world that Bayern Munich were coming in for Mason Mount. Then there was a briefing that Mason Mount was expected to stay at Chelsea all along, and his preference was to stay. Now it's being claimed by Fabrizio that he wants to leave and he believes he'll leave. What's your understanding of this, the saga that is Mason Mount to Manchester United, Ben?
Well, the first thing to say is Manchester United haven't walked away, and I reported that straight after the bid was rejected, and that was 50 plus 5, and Chelsea countered with 58 plus 7. We're talking in pounds for the international audience here. And Manchester United, 24 hours later, obviously intimated through various sources that they were prepared to look at other targets. And oddly, one of them was Moises Caicedo, who, shock horror, is Chelsea's top target at the moment and is a different position to Mount. And then another 24 hours later, we suddenly hear that maybe Bayern will come in and maybe Chelsea will sell to Bayern as a foreign club for a lower number. And there's not really too much substance to that either. So there's a lot of games going on. And that's normal because Manchester United want Mount, but they don't want to cave to Chelsea's demands, and they definitely won't be paying the 58 plus 7. And Chelsea also would now like to sell Mount because they don't believe that he'll end up signing any kind of new deal. And we have to be kind of careful how we paint this because there's lots of sides. So it can actually be possible, and it is actually possible, that Mount wants to leave Chelsea for Manchester United. Mount is pushing for the move. But if at any point Chelsea actually gave Mount the kind of contract that he was looking for in terms of terms, he would then have 2 offers to weigh up. And then who knows how he would react to that. So this is where the narrative gets a little bit dicey because Chelsea sources will argue very clearly one thing, that they've not offered Mount, even though it was perhaps the original plan, a post-season contract, because it's simply been indicated that he won't sign it, that they're far apart in terms, and that he wants to move to Manchester United. So why bother following through and placing a new contract, the first since February, if Mount is simply not going to engage? And then the Mount camp argue a little differently, that they feel the goalposts have changed and it went from a long-term deal that he might have been prepared to sign if the terms were a bit closer to a short-term deal in February he wasn't prepared to sign, to nothing on the table. And this is where we get a bit of a deviation between the Chelsea side and the Mount side. And regardless of that, the context and the history doesn't matter at this point, because right now, Mount wants to go to Manchester United. Manchester United want Mount, and Chelsea are in selling mode, which is why there's still an expectation that this week something might get done. And it's all just going to be about a compromise. So that's where the games come in. Chelsea are trying to hike up the price. Manchester United are trying to stick to their guns. And they're also doing that because with about 100 million, regardless of whether the Glazers stay or go, they would like 2 signings, not 1. So Mount at 65, it's a lot harder to go and get a second player than Mount at 55. And this is why Manchester United are being very disciplined. So I feel like this will resolve itself one way or the other this week, if not in the next 48 hours or so, because the games will stop and the clubs are still in contact. They're not necessarily going to meet face to face in any kind of amicable way, as was suggested by Chelsea when they made their counter offer, but it's highly likely that this will be resolved definitively this week, one way or the other, which means that either the sides will agree something in the middle and a compromise for under 60 million, but a bit more than Manchester United offered, and maybe with a better structure, that type of compromise will be reached. Or finally, Manchester United will have to say, okay, we've done everything in our power. We believe our offer was fair. We've made 3 bids. We've engaged with you. We still haven't got it for under 60 million. So now we do actually have to walk away. But at the time, again, we're speaking, the situation still is that Mount wants to go. Manchester United want Mount. They haven't walked away. They've left their current bid on the table. The clubs are speaking. So I think watch this space over the coming days, because it's still very possible that Mason Mount does end up moving to Manchester United, and quickly.
You know what really intrigued me about this deal when all this news broke? And we did a couple of videos on it. And there was I think it was when Man United put their bid in of 50 plus 5 and it was rejected. And the counter offer came in of 58.7. There was this notion of United have caved in. And it made me laugh because we've had this conversation off air many times and on streams. People, I don't think they don't want to listen or learn and listen to read full articles, gather all the information, but they actually just want the information that suits their own beliefs, like confirmation bias and overdrive. Because so many people are saying, oh, United have already bid over what they wanted to pay. And I thought, Ben very, very openly stated, you must have said this about a month ago now, United don't want to go above 60, which means 60 is their upper limit for what they value the player at. And of course, they start off bidding lower. It's going to be intriguing if we get for a whole month of this deal and it ends up being 60 million as a total fee, including add-ons, which is what yourself and a number of other, I will add, top journalists all said 4 weeks ago. Yeah, about 60 million will end up being where it ends up at. So after all the hullabaloo of 75 to 80 being the asking price, the first bid of around 45 million, you end up where most people predicted it would be. How do you know where it would end up being? Because the information that you receive, you use a little bit of deduction and it ends up being there. But I do agree with you. There's been a lot of gamesmanship over the course of the weekend. The media being not used, but a way of publicly negotiating in terms of moving this deal forward. So yeah, it'll be certainly an interesting one to see how this progresses in the next few days. I wanted to ask you about another deal related to Man United that's kind of trending this morning. I want to get your insight and if you have any understanding of the situation with Andre Onana potentially joining Man United. There's a lot of talk in Italy that it's progressing. We know that the agent met with Manchester United. Any understanding around a potential bid for the goalkeeper from United?
Yeah, it's quite difficult with Onana. The interest from Manchester United is real, but the price is a problem. And the only saving grace in dealing with Inter is they're going to have to sell somebody. They will lose one or two of their assets. So Inter's position with all of their players in the early part of the window, and remember their window opens on July the 1st. So the Premier League are sort of pushing for players, but these clubs are a couple of weeks behind and therefore don't see the window as 2 or 3 weeks open. So Inter are quite bullish at this stage, but they want to try and bring Lukaku to the club either on a loan or a permanent signing. And they would like to keep hold of Lautaro Martinez, not for sale is the official stance. Bastoni appears untouchable. So something's got to give, and it might be Onana. Now, maybe in the next hours, it will be a case of about 20 million euros for Brozovic, and that will help. But there is a possibility for Onana, but Inter are being very difficult on price. So we're not at the point of Manchester United bidding for Onana, but they've explored the deal. And we're hearing all kinds of prices out there ranging from 40 million euros all the way up to 70 million euros. And the kind of prices that are being spoken about verbally by Inter to anyone exploring the deal are at the higher end. So Onana at the lower end of that bracket is a possibility for Manchester United, and Chelsea superficially have explored that deal as well. And if Manchester United move for Onana, it would obviously inform the David De Gea situation, and that has to move this week because the contract is expiring. So with De Gea, the terms are agreed and it is a pay cut, but De Gea hasn't signed. And there's been a lower confidence in the last week or so that he will. So it's not about negotiation with De Gea. The deal is there on the table. It's just whether he signs or not. And I don't think De Gea is going to sign unless he's told that he's going to be the number one goalkeeper heading into the new season, as opposed to it's 50-50 and you fight for your place, or you're going to be the number two. Then it's very different for De Gea. So it's likely that De Gea is going to be resolved before anything moves with Onana. And as a result, it's better with Onana and Manchester United to look at what happens first with De Gea, bearing that in mind that if De Gea extends, he wants the game time. And if you're Onana, you're not going to move to Manchester United unless you're given a guarantee that you're the number one goalkeeper. So whether or not Manchester United move for a number one goalkeeper will first be determined by whether De Gea signs that new deal. And then Manchester United, as the window progresses, are in a really strong position, because if they want De Gea to stay, and that is still uncertain, they've then got time to go out there and try and bring in a goalkeeper for the long term. And this is the reality, and this is the sort of games, again, at this stage, that right now, if Manchester United do want De Gea to stay, and the whole thing is uncertain at this point, but if Manchester United have got an offer on the table, they obviously are open to De Gea signing that. So they need to send the right kind of messaging to De Gea. If he puts pen to paper, they can do what they want after that. And that is just the games of the window. And sources have indicated on the Manchester United side that regardless of De Gea, they will try and bring in a number one goalkeeper, someone that can compete with De Gea, someone that can replace De Gea. But at this point, they have to be very careful with what they're saying to De Gea, because if it's categorical now that, say, they've put in a bid for Onana, then it's almost certain that De Gea will just leave. Maybe now that's what Manchester United want. Maybe they're not that bothered. But again, you don't leave a done deal on the table pending a signature unless you are prepared to keep the player. So it's a very fragile situation with De Gea as to whether he stays or goes. And that's going to have to be resolved first, because the contract expires in a matter of days. And then from there, we see whether Manchester United can move to Onana. Not the number one priority again. So Mount, midfield, traditional number 9, goalkeeper, and then maybe, depending on outgoings like Maguire, some form of defender coming in. But at this stage, budgetary, because of financial fair play and due to uncertainty of ownership, they're not going to be able to do everything. So I don't see Onana as being a today, tomorrow, rush, bid, get kind of deal. I think that if it progresses with Manchester United, price is going to have to come down and it's going to take more time.
Yeah, look, I think the Onana deal is an interesting one for me because we're obviously trying to keep spending in and around that £100 million on these first two players before sales are done or a takeover goes through. And again, if you end up paying over 60 million for Rice, you've got less money for this potential goalkeeper. So yeah, I'm intrigued to see what happens. Maybe if, as you say, United get to this conclusion this week, which there's a certain level of the word I would look for, encouragement or expectation, as you stated, that the Mount deal can get done. Maybe it's this week. If they finalize a price of 50-55 million, it will give them an idea of what they can then spend on maybe a new goalkeeper. If they buy a new goalkeeper, that probably dictates whether or not De Gea signs his deal. But United are also learning here. And I think Man United fans, whether you agree with the players that the club's targeting, the practice is better. A couple of seasons ago, we promised Dean Henderson that he would be given an opportunity to be the first team goalkeeper, and he never got it. And the reason why I think that's dangerous is that you end up creating animosity and problems within a dressing room, which are hard to resolve. So it's much better that we don't sign De Gea up on false pretenses, if you get where I'm coming from, then delaying it. And I know that fans want everything resolved in the here and now, but the football transfer window is never as simplistic as that. As I've already stated, clubs that want to buy our players are going to hold out because they know that we need to sell. And if they just pay us what we want now, they're helping a rival. They won't leave it too late because they want to add players to their team before pre-season. It's just a game. It's all a game of like the club's trying to get the most amount of money possible for sales and pay the least amount of money when buying people. And I know that sounds really basic, but I do think football fans forget that element of the transfer window and they treat it like it's buying a sandwich from Tesco's and you go in and you pay the price, you leave and you eat it. And I don't like to sound condescending, but it may come across that way. Unless you've dealt in multi-million-pound business deals that have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 moving parts and entities involved, it's very difficult to comprehend. It isn't like FIFA. It's not like Football Manager where it's quick, basic negotiations. It all takes a long time. So it feels like that's what's going on with the goalkeeper situation there for United. Viewers, make sure you've hit the like button for us. Make sure you're subscribing and you've hit the bell notification as well. Very, very important for us to do that. There's a super chat for you here, Ben, that says, Ben, you look very yummy today. Love the beard.
I don't think anyone's ever called me yummy, but I appreciate the fact that you not only called me yummy, but you spent $2 to call me yummy. Yeah, the beard is growing a little bit too long. It's a sort of mad King Lear transfer window beard that I might shave at the end of August.
Like it. We're not reading the next one out because the next one's a bit weird. The super chat here that didn't say anything, but thank you very, very much indeed. There's one here from a Liverpool fan that says, I'm honestly, this is at near 0.1% chance of happening, but why are there so many links of Barella to Liverpool? And most of the time is Klopp really likes Barella, but that doesn't mean we'll spend 80 million on him. Have you heard anything about Barella to Liverpool?
We've had links, same with Newcastle, but I think the key thing in that super chat is the fee. And when Newcastle were linked, it was 50 odd million euros, and Inter want way more to even entertain a sale. So this is the type of transfer that, yes, the profile is admired by multiple Premier League clubs. And of course, Liverpool are well aware of who might be available on the market. And there's a feeling, as I said before, that everyone's for sale at Inter. But I don't see Barella going to Liverpool because of price. And that's exactly the same for Caicedo as well. Liverpool have that historical interest in Caicedo, but they're not entering the race for Moises Caicedo. And why? Again, because of price, because it's going to take around, or at minimum, 70 plus 10 as far as Brighton are concerned. And that's 10, 15 million above what Liverpool think is value. And we know that they're disciplined and don't move. So I think that the 0.0001% chance of Barella to Liverpool is probably a fair estimation of likelihood at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, there's more as far as I'm reading around and understanding. I've been told by a few other people of Lavia and Liverpool. Liverpool making a few more inquiries around that, looking at the kind of conditions of the deals and everything else. Is that more likely for Liverpool than the spending on a Barella or of that level of ilk?
Yeah, I still think Kefren Thuram is the one to watch for Liverpool. It seems like there's less now in terms of priority around Kone, which is another player that Liverpool have looked at. I don't see Barella necessarily being something that Liverpool can achieve. There's nothing wrong in some ways with going to Inter and trying to see whether you can get that price down. But the point to reiterate with Barella is not that clubs like Liverpool are not interested, but that to actually progress it, you got to get it well below that 70, 80 million that Inter might be asking for. Whereas I think that there's more value to be had with a player like Thuram. And, you may hear reports that Nice want to keep the player, but the feeling is that Nice are going to have to, again, sell some of their assets. So there is an opportunity there as far as Liverpool are concerned. And we see from the McAllister deal as well that when Liverpool can get a player for around 40, 45 million, they tend to feel that they can move quite fast and they can get it done under the radar. But as soon as that player is 70, 80, 90 million, unless it's value at that number, Liverpool tend to walk away. So I'm certainly not discounting the Liverpool and Barella interest, but it would all come down to fee, which is why there's perhaps a lower optimism of anything actually getting done in the end there. And again, exactly the same for Moises Caicedo as well.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And on Caicedo, obviously there's been links to Manchester United. We know that Chelsea are leading that race. There's a report from The Athletic this morning that states that Man United have held talks with Moises Caicedo's representation about a potential move. Simon Stone has somewhat corroborated that United are looking. But as far as you're aware, is this still more likely to be a Chelsea signing as opposed to anybody coming along and hijacking it?
Well, there's always a chance of hijack, obviously, but I think with Chelsea, they're pushing, and Caicedo can be termed the top target at the moment. And it is going to be a little bit of a circus over the coming week or two, I would imagine, as we get a lot of games and reports over different fees and prices. But I'll stick to what I've always reported, regardless of this 120 million price tag, regardless of this 100 price tag. All sides, in terms of sources, have told me that 70 plus 10 is the yardstick, is the number. And Chelsea obviously agree with that because they came in with a rejected bid about 3 weeks ago of 60 million. And you don't come in at 60 million as a marker bid if you think that the player is going to go for 120 million or you're prepared to pay that. In fact, I don't think I've ever covered a transfer where the starting bid and the end bid have been 60 million apart. And that tells you everything. If someone low balls and ends up overpaying, the maximum gap tends to be 25 or 30 million. Even that is seen as pretty big. So if Chelsea have come in at 60, then it probably means they don't want to pay over 85 million. And it also probably means that they accept that they're going to have to pay 70 million plus. So at that point, you start forgetting about the specific number and thinking about the structure of the deal. Because maybe 70, 75 can get it done with a preferable structure, or maybe you do go up to 85, but how gettable are the add-ons? And Chelsea's add-ons are not as gettable now as they have been historically. So that's another factor in all of this, that if you're Chelsea, you might say Champions League football triggers an add-on and be delighted with that, because if you get Champions League football next season, you're happy to pay the extra money. And if you don't, you've protected yourself, because you've not got Champions League football and you don't have to pay that outlay on the add-ons. So it will sort of be interesting to see how the negotiations take place. Brighton's position has changed on Caicedo since January. When Caicedo signed his new deal, it was made very clear between all parties that he would be allowed to leave this summer. So for a reasonable offer, for a fair offer, clearly Brighton are still going to be tough to negotiate with. But if the number hits something that's reasonable, Caicedo will go. So I still think we're looking at a ballpark of 80 million. And I've said this for months. 70 plus 10 is what industry sources say will get the deal done. And now we have to wait and see whether Chelsea will come in at that, or whether it will be a different kind of structure, or whether Brighton can get that 4 or 5 million more. And I think that this week, Chelsea will move. The personal terms are pretty close with Caicedo. I would expect that to be the simplest part of the deal. He doesn't mind joining Chelsea without European football. And then in terms of complications, Manchester United, there's not much in it. They've had a historical interest, but it's very telling that the Caicedo interest got pushed by Manchester United sources at around about midnight and then the following day after the Mount bid was rejected. So there's an element of games here. If Manchester United want to spend that 50, 60 million, they want an attacking midfielder, they want a traditional number 9, they might need a goalkeeper. So adding a player like Caicedo, of course, they would love him, but can they afford him? And are they going to move for him as a priority position over others? I would say the answer is no. I think that Arsenal's interest has been focused on Declan Rice, and they still may bring in another midfielder. But at this point, they've not moved again for Caicedo. But we have to understand how the Rice situation pans out, because, of course, if they did fail to get Declan Rice, then they might well come back in for Caicedo. But at the moment, and we should be very clear, only at the moment, because transfers are fluid, Chelsea have got a clear run.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. And as you say, it's as of right now. And I did see when all the United hullabaloo was going on, somebody sent me a quote from Fabrizio's that the Caicedo wants Chelsea and Chelsea want Caicedo, and personal terms are almost agreed. And I said, oh, great. Why didn't you quote me in the next line that basically said, unless Man United start to attack the situation, which doesn't mean they will, but that's what fans have got to realize, that nothing is a foregone conclusion. Anything can happen, but you're right. And I believe the same. Everything you've said is my belief, but my belief is based on what the likes of yourself and other top journalists have told us. And you're better to live within the reality rather than in the hope, in my opinion. This year's
one other thing as well, like it's very easy to create a neat narrative in the window and have it in your head. Like Rice wants Arsenal, Arsenal want Rice, West Ham want to sell, he's going to Arsenal. Caicedo, Chelsea, player wants Chelsea, Chelsea want the player. Why haven't they moved? Why haven't they bid? It's not quite that simple, because a player may agree personal terms with a club, may say they want that move, but it's never as black and white as to say only that club until it's signed, because you just never know. And if we've learned one thing from multiple transfer windows, it's a player can want a club and not get the club, and then they have to walk into another club and suddenly they want that club. So Mason Mount may want to stay at Chelsea if they suddenly table the perfect terms for him, but he also wants to move to Manchester United. And similarly, Mudryk wanted Arsenal, but now he wants to be at Chelsea. And Rice wants Arsenal if everything goes to plan. But if for whatever reason Man City did make a bid and it was the best bid and Arsenal walked away, then you suddenly hear Rice saying, I really want to play under Pep Guardiola. So players have to be careful. It's a bit like if you've got a job interview and you are positive that you're going to get that job, and you say all the right things in the job interview that you want the job, and then you tell all your friends that that's your job. And then you have a second job interview, and in that job interview, you got two choices. Are you going to say in that second job interview, I'm so smug and sure that I'm getting the first job, I'm going to tell them that I've got another option, I've got a better option, I'm going to put out there that I don't want the second job? Or are you going to do the other job interview and say all the right things to give yourself two options in case the first job that you think you're going to get falls through? And then if you get the second job, you're not going to walk in and go, hey guys, nice to meet you. It was actually my second choice. I actually had another option. I wanted that other option, but I'm here anyway. Let's make the best of it. Of course not. And this is the same with footballers, that yes, Declan Rice has a priority. Yes, Moises Caicedo has a priority at this stage, but you're never going to be quite categorical about it just in case something changes. And it's the same on the club side as well. So it's really easy to create a narrative as fans just saying, how's Rice not done yet? How's Caicedo not done yet? How's Mount not done yet? Because it's obvious that everyone's pushing in the same direction. And yeah, that's logical, but it is a bit more complicated than that behind the scenes.
Absolutely. And I think that anything can happen. Man United could sign a player tomorrow who suddenly turns ahead of another player they're chasing. As an example, the Man United ownership could change, which suddenly people, hang on, okay, well, that's gone through now. Maybe I'm going to look at that club a little differently. We've seen new managers change the minds of there's no way James Rodriguez, with the profile he had at the time, signs for Everton unless Carlo Ancelotti's there. So anything can change in a window. So yeah, people just stay open-minded about that, I would say. This here says, is there anything concrete? We'll come back to this one in a second. I want to stay on Chelsea for 1 sec. This here says, chances of Chelsea moving for Osimhen this summer.
Well, we know that they're looking. Napoli's perspective is not for sale. Where they've been a bit inconsistent is that now they're starting to say, unless an astronomical offer comes in that's in the interest of the club, which is actually code for hit the number and the player will be for sale.
Yeah,
so Osimhen wants the Premier League. Chelsea and Manchester United would be very keen, but it's financially difficult at this point. And Napoli's perspective, even though there's an element of debate over this, is that they paid for the player a total package of 80 million euros. And the reason why there's debate over this is because not all of that was guaranteed fee. And there was a player swap, and there's a whole backstory here around whether the valuation on those players that went to Lille was actually inflated. But Napoli say the total package is 80 million, including add-ons, including player swap, including cash. And I think the cash element was pushing 50 million euros. So they're taking 80 million, Napoli, and they're doubling it effectively. And they're saying 150 to 160 million euros is the number that we would consider. Because why would we sell the player for 100 million euros when we bought the player for 80 million euros and he's been in red hot form? And this is the challenge for suitors. But the player would be keen on the Premier League. And actually, a lesser known fact about Osimhen is that before he joined Napoli, he had an offer from Manchester United and he very nearly took it. But he spoke to a friend of his in Igalo who was at the football club at the time. And he realized that he'd actually be behind Igalo in terms of game time and the pecking order to begin with. And if Igalo was not getting that consistent game time or in the starting 11 every week, then why would Osimhen be in the starting 11? So he thought to himself, it was too early to move to Manchester United. But Manchester United is always a club that Osimhen has had a soft spot for. But I just don't think that Manchester United can make those finances work under either new ownership or existing ownership, unless they abandon their pursuit of the midfield and of a defender and don't even bother with a goalkeeper. They'd have to basically put all their summer budget towards Osimhen, and it might drag on throughout the summer. So Chelsea could be there. I still think Dusan Vlahovic in Chelsea is one to watch as well. And the other thing with Chelsea is that just because Nicholas Jackson has arrived, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to move for a traditional goal scorer. So keep an eye on Vlahovic. Osimhen is possible. I think it would be unthinkable that somebody doesn't at least try from the Premier League. Why would you just sit back and take the Napoli valuation and we don't want to sell effectively and use that to not explore the deal more seriously?
Yeah, of course.
But the other thing to point out is that Osimhen and Napoli have a, in principle, but not signed, 2-year extension. So if it drags on, or if Napoli continue to price the player out of the market, then there is a possibility that Osimhen just says, okay, I actually don't think that Napoli are going to budge on price here. I want to settle my future, and I am just going to sign that 2-year deal. So the basic framework of that deal is near ready to go. But obviously it's not been signed because Osimhen is keeping his options open. So I wouldn't rule out Chelsea making an approach. And if they do so, then with Nkunku already in and all the other players that they signed in January, plus Nicholas Jackson, they would have incredible depth and young talent for the future. And this is all Chelsea really need for all of the debate over the ins and the outs and the swollen squad size and the financial aspects and for all of last season's mid-table mediocrity. If Chelsea add one player that is near guaranteed to get them 20 plus goals, then they're going to be in for a very successful season.
They very well could be. And what has been helping Chelsea in the last few weeks sort of deflate their squad have been these purchases from numerous Saudi clubs. Of course, there's been a lot of controversy with this, the likes of Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville calling it out. What's the latest in terms of any more deals of whether it's Chelsea players or other Premier League players moving to the Saudi league? We had a super chat actually asking, is there anything concrete about Thiago going to Saudi? What's your latest understanding of goings on there, Ben?
Thiago is actually a target. I'm not too aware of how far advanced that one is. This is the thing to understand. There's lots of Saudi targets that they're not getting. Luka Modric was one. They made him an astronomical offer and he's officially renewed at Real Madrid for an extra year. And that was always likely to be the case. But what that tells you is that same with Son, the Saudis will be back in 2024. And you may note that Son said he wants to stay in the Premier League, but that was, again, always the case. There was a lot of twisted reporting around Son being now, when, as I reported months back, Son is a target for 2024. And we wait and see whether in a year's time the player changes his mind. But Son made it clear to the Saudis weeks back, months back even, that he was not going to be available in this transfer window. He wants to stay at Spurs and he wants to be part of now the Ange Postecoglou project. Then Bobby Firmino is the big one. Al Ahly are really, really confident on this one. They feel like they've already got the basic framework of personal terms agreed. So it's only about formalities and final negotiations. I should stress it's not done. And we have to be careful, therefore, about getting those that want Firmino to make that move, or maybe just some Liverpool fans that are interested, overexcited. But watch this space, because Al Ahly have got everything in place. By everything in place, I mean the medical is booked for later in the week. They've shown the player accommodation. They have put the framework in place for the basic wage, and that has been verbally indicated as acceptable. The contract length has been verbally indicated as acceptable, but there are other aspects like image rights, bonuses, and so on. So you never know, because players can sometimes use these big offers as leverage to try and get the move that they want and maybe bump up the terms. But if we're talking about Saudi sources, they are adamant that they think that that one is going to be the next big signing to go through. Away from the Premier League, I think we mentioned it earlier, Brozovic is one to watch as well. And that one is entering into the final stages, but there's no player green light. And then we're still going to see, I would say, 15 or 20 other names over the course of the coming weeks, because the Saudi target is 20 elite names that would be seen as tier one, but entering into that kind of 30 plus stage. And then there's about 30 to 50 other targets that are maybe not as high profile, but still established predominantly European footballers. And the plan is to sort of get 4 or 5 names by the end of the summer at the big 4 clubs in Saudi Arabia. So I expect this to be a really big move by Saudi. I expect it to be almost daily updates throughout the window with who they're chasing and how they're progressing. On the Chelsea side, Hakim Ziyech will be the next one to Al Nassr. Koulibaly's already been announced. Edouard Mendy's joining Al Ahly. We know about N'Golo Kante as well. And then just away from the targets, I do think it's worth pointing out that people are somehow Chelsea bashing here when the Saudi approach is the Saudi approach. So if we want to scrutinize the Saudi approach, absolutely, that needs investigation, that needs transparency. But every single player the Saudis are signing is having their wages doubled or tripled or quadrupled of the elite names. So then when people say Chelsea are benefiting through special treatment because these stars they want to get rid of would never be signed by anyone else on these wages. Well, yes, that's true. But that's the opportunism of what Saudi are doing. And they're paying the same big wages to everyone. It's not like they've gone to Chelsea and said, we didn't want Koulibaly, but we'll take him as a special favour.
Yeah, for you.
And by the way, also, we're wanting to pay Koulibaly less wages and we're going to give him more wages because we want to do you a favour. As, by the way, the owners of Newcastle United as well, driving the deal. Every single Saudi player signed at that level is getting the same ×2, ×3, ×4 in wages. And no one's forcing the players to go. So if Chelsea were benefiting beyond just a regular outgoing, and of course they're benefiting from that, they've hit the outgoings jackpot. But if they were unduly benefiting, it would have to be down to getting a inflated fee. And the fee for Koulibaly is only just above 20 million euros. The fee for Mendy is under 20 million euros. The fee for Ziyech is 10 million euros. So the combined fee for those three is the same for Ruben Neves at Wolves almost, which is 55 million euros. And yet there's a hullabaloo about Chelsea, but there's no hullabaloo about the fee that was paid to Wolves for Ruben Neves. And there's no hullabaloo about the fee that Arsenal paid to Chelsea for Kai Havertz. And why? Because it's a good bit of business for all parties. And I think Arsenal might even get the last laugh there. I think that if Havertz gets going, he'll be a really good signing for them. But we have to be fair about this, because I can guarantee you that 90% of the people criticizing, like Gary Neville, if it was Havertz to Al Nassr for £67.5 million, so 80 odd million euros, that would be the focus. And it would somehow be Havertz, who flopped at Chelsea, who didn't score many goals last season. How dare Saudi Arabia pay 80 million euros to sign Kai Havertz? There must be collusion. But when it's Arsenal, it's good business all round, because it is good business all round. Yeah. And with Koulibaly and with Mendy and with Ziyech, guess what? It's good business all round, because Chelsea get rid of the deadwood, Chelsea get rid of the wages, Saudi Arabia get the players for a much lower fee than Ruben Neves, and they want these players because even though for Chelsea they're surplus to requirements, they're big assets for the Saudi league to help them grow. So it's just, I think, people not understanding the reality of the situation. And then, of course, people will say, well, aren't PIF and Clearlake Capital in bed together? Or aren't Kane International, another Bowley company, and PIF in bed together? Yeah, they've got an excellent business relationship. So, of course, it's going to be easier for them to approach each other and do business. But that's just football. But we can't be suggesting that Clearlake actually used PIF to fund the Chelsea takeover. And my understanding is they're not a majority investor and they're not an active investor in Clearlake. They've been a historical investor in Clearlake. So it comes back to one thing. Why would the majority owner of Newcastle United want to do Chelsea Football Club any favours? And I don't see anything in the deals that's inconsistent with other Saudi deals. So what we should be doing is scrutinising, why are all these deals so big? Is it going to work? Is it all going to end in tears? Are the players going to like it and stay? Is there sports washing? What are they going to do over the following windows? How is it going to impact the Premier League and other European leagues? And is it above board? Because there's a lot of FIFPro cases against other Saudi players that never got their big wages. So we can't forget about the past. We have to scrutinise the Saudi league. But Neville is specifically saying this is Chelsea and PIF in bed together.
Yeah.
And to me, I've seen no evidence of that. But that's just my opinion, and Gary Neville is perfectly entitled to his.
Do you know what I find interesting about it? I saw what Jamie Carragher said around, he called for the Premier League and UEFA to investigate the summer transfers to Saudi as it emerged. When it emerged, they were looking at Bernardo Silva. And the first thing that popped into my head is that European clubs in the past 15 to 20 years have pillaged South America of all their talent at a young age. Not the last player that I remember breaking through in Brazil, as an example, who was playing in their leagues and was a star before coming to Europe was Neymar. And that man's in his 30s now. The majority of players now, the Vinicius Juniors of this world, etc. I mean, Messi is an older example from Argentina. You've got Garnacho that was at Atletico Madrid, now at Manchester United. We have more money than the South American nations and their leagues, and we take all their talent. Now, we're taking them at a younger age, fair enough, but the hypocrisy of the English, the hypocrisy of Europe to moan that suddenly a nation with far more resource than we have for this type of spending wants to start purchasing stars from Europe. And I think there is a fear factor of almost that element of, you know, they're going to buy some older stars now. What if they do start to get Bernardo Silvas and they're getting they're getting a Ruben Neves and they start to sign some young players? And you can create a really good league anywhere in the world if you've got the money, the resources, and the infrastructure. We were both out in Doha. We saw how they built. I mean, you could theoretically host the entire Premier League in that city over the course of a season. Maybe not with as many teams because of all the stadiums they built. You can do that. And look, for me, I just look at it as more money being injected into football. As long as that money is spread across the game right down to grassroots level, I've got no issue with it. I just think it's rank hypocrisy for the Europeans to start complaining about money coming in that might damage or weaken our game. But we have no one moans when Real Madrid sign the next 13-year-old Brazilian superstar ahead of time and pay his club £15 million compensation for it. No one cares then. But this way round is a big problem. So, yeah, for me, I've got no personal issue with it at all. I really, really don't. I think people have just got to stop being hypocrites and get on with things. Like, it's as simple and as straightforward. And I don't think you're not going to damage the lure and the prestige of European football simply with money. Now, you look at someone like Neves. Neves has gone, but there is also talk he might come back on loan. And I know me and you have spoken about these deals before. The deals to play in Saudi have not always been as cast iron as a 5-year deal at Man City. There is always you might be able to leave and come back. They'll own the image rights to you. So it's never going to be as clear cut. But I don't see a Vinicius Jr. at his age now going to play in Saudi Arabia, because at the moment, they're winning their leagues and winning whatever trophies they have, and I mean that with respect, are not prestigious enough. And a lot of footballers are motivated, yes, by money, but also by the prestige of winning those trophies. But someone who's in their late 20s, in their early 30s, has achieved what they want or has got to the highest level they think they can in Europe, you're suddenly offered 50, 60, 70 million a year to play in Saudi. In my opinion, you're mad to say no, because that's beyond, and it's tax-free as well. It's tax-free. If you need some offshore banking advice, give me a call. I'll put you in contact with my old colleagues. Never pay tax on that money. And yeah, enjoy life. Yeah, it's crazy to me personally, Ben. It's crazy. But there we go.
I think that the thing to understand about the play, probably the most important thing to understand about what's going on at the moment, is just that we're looking at football through the prism of teams and brands and leagues, and Saudi Arabia are looking at football through the prism of players. So what's interesting about the strategy is younger audiences are less team focused, especially global football fans that can't see a certain team week in, week out. So a lot of people follow players around the world, which means that instead of having that affinity to one team, you actually have an affinity to a player. And when a Messi moves, a Ronaldo moves, an Mbappe moves, a lot of young audiences follow the player, not the team, which is strange to someone of my generation, because I can't understand people that don't have a team. But then I'm fortunate to work as journalist and previously as a kid, as a fan, in a region that has a top league with top teams. So I can go and watch those teams. So I have no reason to say I'm going to watch Manchester United one week and then Liverpool the next week and then Real Madrid the next week. But the vast majority of the world's population, and especially around the Middle East and North Africa, will have 7 or 8 teams. They'll wear 7 or 8 shirts. And it's largely because they love players. So Saudi Arabia are almost changing the model here, and they're saying, wait a minute, instead of doing a partnership with Manchester United, instead of bringing Liverpool to Saudi Arabia, instead of sponsoring Arsenal, what if we actually just brought the player, who increasingly has a bigger following than some of these teams if they're really elite, and put them in one of our teams? Does that not only grow our league, but does that also take all that global audience that are not in Saudi Arabia and make them turn their head towards Saudi Arabia? So this is a very player-focused strategy that ultimately buys into the belief that young audiences maybe care more about players now than they do about teams if they're not living in that city of the team. And older football fans, more traditional football fans will say, well, hang on a minute, I'm an Arsenal fan. I'll always be an Arsenal fan. How can you possibly say that if, let's just say, Saka ever left Arsenal, that I would suddenly start supporting Saka's new club? But not every football fan that is a Saka fan or a Ronaldo fan or a Messi fan thinks that way. So if you look at PSG, when Messi left PSG, I think they lost 2 million followers. And if you look at Inter Miami, I think they gained 7 million followers all in the space of 24 hours. So if that tells you that there's 7 million people there that are really only following Messi, whether he's playing for Barcelona or Inter Miami or PSG, then that 7 million is marketable. And that's the 7 million that Saudi Arabia are looking at when they're making these signings.
Absolutely right. And there's a brilliant documentary about Ronaldo where they delve into that in more detail, and how sort of in the early, about 10 years ago, this shift, the Americanization of our sport came through. The only one thing I would say is we need to ban this from European football, the phrase franchise player. You should be, if you're a journalist and you say it, you should be struck off. If you're a pundit, you should lose your job. If you're a YouTuber, YouTube should shut you down. The word franchise player has got to be banned from our sport. But anyway, that's me being an old man. I wanted to ask you, Ben, about Declan Rice to Arsenal. I know it's a story which is up and down and inside out. On Thursday night, Gooners were panicking because DiMarzio said there was confidence, and a deal was getting close, but there's been no official bid. The ex-West Ham employee, who is a very credible person at West Ham, has said he still prefers Arsenal. What's going on with Declan Rice? Will this deal cost Arsenal over £100 million? Talk to us, Ben Jacobs, please, because I'm intrigued.
Yeah, it's structure, not number. So if it's at 100, the structure will be better for Arsenal. If it's under 100, then ultimately they'll probably have to pay more in the guaranteed fee or more up front. The West Ham starting position has been that they want a guaranteed fee of somewhere in the region of 85 million, and they want a big chunk of that up front, and they want gettable add-ons, and you would expect that on the West Ham side. Arsenal have obviously done what Arsenal always do. They've made multiple bids. I can't think of many big transfers where Arsenal have had a first bid accepted. And you have to understand that that's not because Arsenal never get a first bid accepted. It's because Arsenal's first bid is almost indicative. And if you've been following the Manchester United takeover, the indicative offers in that didn't mean that much. They were markers, they were non-binding. And this is what Arsenal do. They make multiple bids. So you have to respect that strategy. And I know it was frustrating with Mudryk. And also, let's not forget, they tried a couple of times for Rafinha before Chelsea had a bid accepted, and then he subsequently went to Barcelona. So it's funny how fans forget the past. Fans don't understand often their club strategy. And then they're surprised. How on earth have we bid a first bid and it's so low and it's got rejected? Well, you should have learned that this is how your club work. They always make 2 or 3 bids. They always do it this way. They're always disciplined and they're always prepared to walk away. But with Rice, it feels a little bit different in the sense that the deal is getting closer. Arsenal will bid a third time, and there is a willingness from all parties to get this done. Rice, as I've said many times, would ideally like to stay in London. It won't be the only factor, but that's part of his thinking. He's spoken to Arteta. He knows he's going to get the automatic game time when fit. And he's also been told, even though it's not going to happen overnight, that he's a future captain potentially at the football club. You can't guarantee it. Arsenal have got a captain, but that's another thing in Rice's thinking. He wants to lead. He's led at West Ham. He's not going to walk into Manchester City and have any chance really in the next few years, I don't think, of being the next captain. Of course, one interesting thing is Manchester City's captain has left. So there will be a new captain at Manchester City, but I don't see it being Declan Rice if they're successful from the word go. I don't think that's in Pep Guardiola's thinking. And at the time we're recording this, Manchester City haven't bid either. So this is in Arsenal's hands. This is about Arsenal getting a deal done with West Ham. And I think eventually it is going to be 95 to 100 million, and the final number will all depend upon the structure. And I think Arsenal are going to have to go up by at least 5 million in their guaranteed fee, if not slightly more. And I think that there's an acceptance on Arsenal's part of that. They don't want to walk away empty-handed here. So Rice does want Arsenal. Personal terms are not a problem. And this is where Arsenal fans can have a little bit of comfort. Because if Arsenal are to get a deal with West Ham and Manchester City are going to get a deal with West Ham, then obviously naturally it would then come down to which one does the player prefer. And I think even if Manchester City agree a deal, as long as Arsenal agree a deal, I still think that Declan Rice will end up picking Arsenal over Manchester City. And perhaps this is why Manchester City have hesitated from saying they would bid to not bidding, because they're also aware that the player has a strong desire to join Arsenal. So now Arsenal need to agree a deal with West Ham. That's the only thing that matters in all of this. There is a third bid incoming, might go in today, certainly by midweek. And once that third bid is officially tabled, we'll wait and see whether or not that's good enough, because if it's good enough, then Declan Rice will be an Arsenal player. And I think that Manchester City know that. It's not to say that they're giving up, but the Manchester City strategy has to be to agree a deal with Arsenal first. And if they top Arsenal's number, then the ball becomes in Arsenal's court, as with Mudryk. Are they prepared to go any higher? But Man City can't agree a deal yet with West Ham until they've bid. So we have to understand whether they're going to bid. And if Arsenal's third bid goes in before Manchester City even bid, then again, all signs tell you that all parties feel that Declan Rice will end up at Arsenal.
Very interesting insight there, as you say. And I think that the lack of bid from City, because generally when you see news that comes out that they're looking at a player from top journalists like yourself, like David Ornstein, there's normally a bid that subsequently comes very quickly. But it's been 5 days now since the Ornstein tweet that broke that kind of confirmed that what everybody knew, that they were interested, and nothing has progressed. And as you've told us, I don't know how many times in the last couple of years, Ben, clubs tend to not bid unless they are categorically sure a player is going to agree to join them, which is why I know the phrase changes from journalist to journalist, but from a basic term, for me as a football fan, if your club's bidding, typically they've agreed to the personal terms, or they're willing to agree to them and sign them later on down the line. So maybe Man City's bid is not forthcoming because the player has said, as long as Arsenal match your bid or better it, I'm joining them. And be very interesting to see what City do in the coming days surrounding this deal. It really, really will be. But as you said, a lot of Arsenal fans got very frustrated on Thursday night, throwing their toys out, throwing their toys out their pram. And I got why, because, I think they're so jaded because of the situation with Caicedo and Mihailo Mudryk in January and are worried about it happening again. But it feels like things are in a confident place right there with Rice. In terms of, there's actually a super chat here about Kai Havertz. It said, Arsenal getting Havertz is us getting a player with Champions League experience, which most of the Arsenal squad doesn't have. Clever signing, in my opinion. You look at Havertz, you look at the Timber deal that looks like it's going to happen. Declan Rice, they're still the favourites for on leading that race. How good is, from your point of view as a football person, how good a summer do you think this is looking like being for Arsenal in terms of their ability next year to take this title away from Man City?
Well, I think Arsenal will want to consolidate. Of course, you don't go from having the lead they had and then the unfortunate wobble from Arsenal's perspective to saying that you don't want to challenge for the Premier League. But I also think deep down, even if they don't admit it publicly, Arsenal will be absolutely delighted if they just consolidate their place in the top four. And if they can close the gap on Manchester City, then it becomes a bonus. But we need to wait also and see what other teams do, because Chelsea are going to be stronger, Liverpool are going to be stronger, Newcastle might be stronger as well. So it's a tough one, because right now we don't know the final squads. But if you're looking at paper and if you're adding a signing or two that is looking likely for each club, then there's really not much on paper heading into the new season between Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Manchester United. So it's really difficult to understand at this point whether Arsenal are going to take a step forwards, and what is a step forwards. Is a step forwards winning the Premier League because many feel they should have won it and got over the line last season, or is a step forwards for Arsenal comfortably qualifying for the Champions League and getting 80 plus points? But you might need 90, 95 to win the Premier League. And I think it's the latter, but I understand why Arsenal fans might be unenthused by that suggestion. And then when you look at the window for Arsenal, I think Havertz will prove to be a really good bit of business, genuinely. There's a lot of debate over the fee. And of course, he isn't joining as a proven goal scorer, but he's the right fit. And I think that Arteta will get the best out of him. And in the same way that Arsenal fans kind of were unhappy they didn't get Mudryk, and Trossard somehow seemed underwhelming, actually, I think Trossard's been a good signing for Arsenal. So if Arsenal get Rice, then job done. If they then add Timber plus Havertz, it's already a good window. And this is where maybe Chelsea in January have warped the thinking in the market. Because if you come out of a summer window with 4 or 5 senior signings, that's a really busy window. If you come out of the summer window with £250 million of spending, that's record spending. If you come out of the summer window breaking your club record, that's ambition. So what more do people expect? If Arsenal sign Jurrien Timber for 40, 50 million, Kai Havertz for potentially up to 67.5 million, then add Rice for, let's just call it 100 million package, and then bring in another midfielder, get their outgoings resolved, work out what's going on with Balogun. He could be sold for 35 million. Keep an eye on Crystal Palace, but maybe preseason will change that. If they continue to get the best out of Trossard, then maybe get a left back. And imagine if that was a fullback like João Cancelo, then you're in a position where that's incredible. That's a dream window. That's £250 million or more. That's 4 or 5 players. That's the spine of a team with a mixture of depth players, players for the future, and automatic starters. And yet people will always say, we want more, we want more, we want more. Why are we not going in for another forward? Why are we not going in for another midfielder? How have we not moved for this player that another club's moved for? Liverpool fans are guilty of this as well. Everyone's saying, God, why are Liverpool so slow and quiet? They've pulled off the best bit of business this window so far, getting Alexis McAllister for 35 million. And yet people want more and more and more. So if Arsenal get Rice, regardless of anything else that happens in the window, they'll have had a decent window. And if they add any more than Rice, it for me anyway, I don't know whether Arsenal fans disagree, it's bordering on a dream window.
Listen, Arsenal's there's so much business going on at the same time. There's obviously the loose Lavia links as well. Let's see what happens with another midfielder coming in once the Rice situation is resolved. But yeah, look, I think they're looking like having a brilliant summer. And if what you've said comes to fruition, that they get this Rice deal done, Timber over the line, Havertz already through the door, that announcement is going to be imminent. We know he's going to be a player. I almost switch off of deals once, medicals are happening, because the likelihood of it falling apart is so low. Ben, I know you've got to shoot, my friend. I know you've got a hard stop at 12. We're gonna continue the stream for a few minutes and go through the rest of your super chats. Ben, always a pleasure to speak to you, my friend.
Speak soon and look forward to it, and have a good week, everyone. See you later.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Igal here actually says, Ben, we will never be happy. We always want more. And look, there's always wanting more, but there's understanding where you're at with things as well. There's a comment earlier on that says this transfer window will define both Arsenal and Man United seasons. For both our teams, Terry, we need to shut people up and handle business. I agree with you largely on that. It's going to be very, very important. Is it possible that United are only going for players after the price has been negotiated by other clubs to reduce the United tax? Potentially. That could potentially be true. I believe Man United have got more money than we're suggesting. Man United tax is 110% a real thing. If you read KPMG's report that talks about the value of players, what they call market potential increases the valuation of a player. The bigger the team, the more marketable the club, the more famous the club, the higher the price can be pushed up. I think Man United, it's a weird thing to be annoyed about, but we're annoyed about it because we haven't been that club for 10 years, but we get treated like we are in the transfer market. So we always end up overpaying. I hope what you're saying is true, but we'll see what comes to fruition. Refreshing to hear non-biased agenda based on analysis. Any mainstream media has a massive agenda against us, so good to hear a different perspective. Thank you very much. And look, some people want Ben will wind up a lot of people when he comes on because he won't say exactly what they want to hear. But why would you want to be lied to? Why would you want to only be fed the side of the story that suits your purpose? Fabrizio said the other day about Caicedo. Caicedo wants Chelsea. Chelsea want Caicedo. Unless Man United start to push hard for that deal. Imagine being a deluded Chelsea fan ignoring that second half of it. Imagine being a Man United fan and ignoring the second half of it and just going with the first line. That basically means right now he wants it, but if Man United push hard, it could change. So that means right now Chelsea are leading and they should feel confident. But if suddenly United are linked, it isn't, no way. Fabrizio said 100% he wants us. That isn't what he said. I don't understand how people's minds work in terms of deluding themselves. It's a strange one to me. Do you know why it takes clubs days to make bids? We didn't get around to asking Ben that question. There's so many reasons as to why. Sometimes it's just about, don't look desperate. If you look desperate, they'll keep pushing the price up. If you look like you're going to walk away, I've done this before. I want to deal on a car. A smaller example, but same principle. I want to buy a car. How much is selling it? Always do this to a car dealership. Test drive it. Get them right to the end and go, it's just too expensive for me, though. They may say nothing we can do. Walk away. Leave it a day or two. They'll phone you first. Yeah, look, I found another dealer who's got same car. Maybe some slight differences, but theirs is like $6,000 cheaper. Might be get $2 or $3,000 off. That's what you do. If they just say no, nothing we can do, you say, okay, cool, that's fine. Then you're going to be in a panic. Keep your powder dry in negotiations. It's key. It is absolutely key. But there we go. Viewers, look, I want to say a big thank you to all of you for tuning in today. If you've only just tuned in, all the video is timestamped, so you can go back to the beginning and go to the different parts. We spoke about Timber. We spoke about Mount, Victor Osimhen, Barella, De Gea, Onana. What else we spoke about today? Kai Havertz. We spoke about Saudi Arabia. Loads of things covered today on the show. Ben giving great insight as ever to us on the terrace. Do me a big favor and hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribing to the show. Until next time, take care. Goodbye. God bless. By the way, when you subscribe, turn on the bell notification button. Make sure you've got that turned on. It's very important indeed that you get that done. We're growing all the time in terms of the amount of you that are doing it, but we want to get 100,000 of you in total with that bell notification turned on. We're not far away from it. We want to get that done. Until next time, take care. Goodbye. God bless, and we'll see you all again.